It seems the world has become obsessed with Stoicism. Arguably, Ryan Holiday started this trend, but now everywhere you look, from celebrities to Instagram influencers, people have started to equate Stoicism with personal growth, with philosophy, and even with masculinity itself. In this video, I'm going to show you 5 alternatives to Stoicism that you might not even have known existed, and in doing so, expose you to alternative approaches that can help enhance your life. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying Stoicism is a bad philosophy or that it's useless, not by a long shot. I myself aim to practice some of its core ideas: self-discipline, emotional control, and acceptance of the inherent good in all of life's ups and downs. But the problem with Stoicism isn't so much a problem with Stoicism itself. It's more a problem of how we approach many of these isms in the first place. There actually is a danger in buying into any ism too much. Think of the isms that have been prominent throughout history and have been used to commit terrible acts, and you know what I mean. But let's take a concrete example to show you what I mean. If we look at this Instagram influencer's post, for example, we see he equates being a man versus a boy with practicing Stoicism. Yet, it's entirely possible to not be a Stoic and still fully be a man. See Socrates, Aristotle, Confucius, etc. So then the problem is that Stoicism has become an ideology for many people. So much so that when they're given self-help advice, they have to go back to see what Marcus Aurelius said first, one of the most prominent historical Stoics, to see whether he would agree with that advice. You know, kind of like checking with a cult leader to see if it's okay to contact your family. Okay, extreme comparison, but my point is we have to use our critical thinking to determine which ideas make the most sense, not just the newest, trendiest ism. So how about exploring a few more ideas aside from Stoicism, identify some of their core beliefs, and then instead of swearing allegiance to a specific philosophy, simply take the ideas that actually work for your life and discard the ones that don't. The first one we'll explore is Epicureanism. Now, most people associate Epicureanism with either fine dining or binge eating for the sake of raw pleasure, but that's not at all what Epicureanism teaches. Epicurus, who lived around 300 to 200 BCE, did teach that pleasure is the highest good, but he didn't mean the type of pleasure you'd get by going to a party and getting wasted. Instead, he taught the importance of making decisions in our lives that will ultimately lead to long-term happiness. So, for example, in response to your feelings of tiredness in the morning and not wanting to go to the gym, Epicurus would likely tell you, yes, you feel tired, but think about all the long-term happiness and satisfaction you'll feel by exercising consistently every morning. Think about how much better your mood will be and how much better your sleep will be. Epicurus taught that we should all pursue a state of being called ataraxia, which roughly translates to mental peace and freedom from fear. We achieve this, he taught, through what today would be called minimalism. The more stuff we have lying around and the more we accumulate, the more anxiety it produces, he thought. So the highest form of activity we can pursue isn't in the material side of life, such as flashy cars, big houses, and fancy dinners. Instead, it's friendship. Epicurus believed that friendship ultimately leads to ataraxia, or mental peace. Even the simplest meal, he taught, becomes the most amazing experience when eaten with a friend. Whereas you could eat the fanciest meal all by yourself, and the happiness you get from it simply won't be the same. What principles do you see in Epicureanism that resonate with you? Which of these can you start using in your own life? The second philosophy we'll discuss is Cynicism. When you hear the word cynicism, what do you think of? You probably think of a crabby person who questions people's motives and hates everyone. And yeah, that's what the word cynicism has come to mean, but that's not what it originally meant. Instead, the philosophy of cynicism originated with Diogenes of Sinope, who lived in the 400s BCE. Now, Cynics were a pretty interesting bunch, and they couldn't be more different from the Epicureans. The word cynic itself comes from the root word for dog. And true to this term, you could easily call Cynicism the dog philosophy. Simply put, Cynics saw certain virtues in dogs that they believed were lacking in humans, and as such saw a dog's life as the most virtuous life. From that standpoint, their core teachings all derive from the virtues they saw in dogs, among which are self-sufficiency, asceticism, contempt for traditional values, directness of speech, and cosmopolitanism. Let's break these down a bit. Think of how a dog behaves. Dogs are quite honest, for sure. They don't hide their intentions. When they want something, they approach you directly to beg for it. They're incredibly loyal. They live simply, and of course, they don't have human ideas such as political boundaries. In our modern times, Diogenes probably would tell you things like, if you want it, be assertive and ask directly. Be resourceful and independent. Patriotism is stupid. You don't belong to any country. Or don't follow what the crowd is doing just because it's always been done that way. Follow your own way instead. Which, if any of these ideas, do you resonate with? Do you see any that you could incorporate into your own life? The third philosophy we'll look at is Taoism. This philosophy originates in the East, and it couldn't be more different from both Epicureanism and Cynicism. Taoism, I admit, is kind of hard for me to describe. But it's not only hard for me to describe, it's admittedly hard for Taoists to describe also. Why? Because at first glance it seems full of contradictory statements such as the way is everything and nothing, and describable and indescribable. But I believe this wording is less literal than expressive. Expressive though, in what way? Well, the entire philosophy of Taoism seems to revolve around the concept of harmony or balance. Indeed, this is where we get the famous yin-yang concept that almost everyone knows from popular culture. The image of the yin-yang represents Taoism very well. This philosophy teaches that nothing is ever absolute. As we see in the yin-yang, some of the white part is in the black part, and some of the black part is in the white part, symbolizing that everything contains its opposite. For example, a Taoist today might tell you that within a horrible situation also lies the solution to that situation, that accumulating wealth or value may take away value in some other area, such as your health, or even that becoming wiser makes you realize how much you lack wisdom. And all of these things, although seemingly contradictory, can actually be true upon closer inspection. Another concept central to Taoism is the idea of Wu Wei, or essentially non-force. So remember how I said a Taoist today might tell you, well, they probably wouldn't tell you anything. Whereas the philosophies of Stoicism, Epicureanism, and Cynicism actually tell you, you should do this thing rather than this thing. Taoism, again in a seeming contradiction, doesn't seem to make any specific recommendations at all. Indeed, a Taoist would be more likely to ask you a question than to give you a command or instruction. A Taoist does not want the use of force, however slight or even implied, to be involved in any interaction. What do you think of Taoism? Do you believe it's on the right track, or does it go too far in one direction so as not to actually be useful for guiding our lives? If you love discussing these questions and so many more topics such as entrepreneurship, productivity, literature, or even the latest scientific findings, you'll love being part of my free Think It Through Discord community that you can join in the pinned comment below. We regularly share interesting books and news, free resources for career development and personal growth, and even have audio and video lounges where you can hang out and have productivity or study sessions with other members. Come on in and join the conversation. The fourth philosophy we'll look at is Cyrenaicism. Now, this is the philosophy that often gets confused with Epicureanism. Also from ancient Greece, the Cyrenaics were, well, you could call them the party hard philosophy. And by party hard, I mean that if they were alive today, they would be that cousin who invites friends over constantly for wild parties, maxes out their credit card to buy all the kegs and DJs, and forgets to pick up their little sister from school because they were too busy playing playing video games and eating junk food while high. The Cyrenaics, in short, focused on immediate gratification, and in fact, they taught that that was the only thing that mattered. As such, knowledge and books and learning were all useless, because after all, they don't give you immediate pleasure. Ideas of right and wrong are too constricting and don't give us pleasure, so those are out too. The idea was basically spend all your money, have all the sex you want, do literally whatever feels good in the moment, because ultimately, you're just gonna die anyway. You know, it's important to look at every philosophy, not just the ones we agree with. Why? Well, do you really know what you want in life or what the right direction is for your life if you can't think through other philosophies and understand why you wouldn't accept them? In order to know we have the right ideas, we need to expose ourselves to all ideas. And that brings us to the fifth and final philosophy, one that I'm pretty sympathetic to, but which, again, I don't follow unquestioningly, and that is Aristotelianism. And, well, as it sounds, it's the philosophy of Aristotle. Now, if you really want to understand Aristotle's philosophy in depth, then you can just read his work Nicomachean Ethics, or read the thousands of books and articles analyzing it. But here I'm just going to share a few key ideas that I think truly define Aristotle's thinking. So Aristotle, being a philosopher, was pretty biased. He believed that the best possible life was a life lived in the pursuit of knowledge and wisdom, what he called eudaimonia. And wouldn't we all want to build a philosophy to justify what we're doing as the highest good? Sure, but this idea actually does have a lot of merit to it. Yes, Aristotle believed that happiness in life was important, but he simply saw it as a feeling. And if pain and suffering were necessary to achieve knowledge and wisdom, then we should still choose knowledge and wisdom. Contrast that to the Stoics for a moment, because see, you might now say, oh well, that's pretty similar to Stoicism so far. And yes, it kind of is. But the key difference here is in what each of these schools of thought considered as the highest good. While Stoics such as Marcus Aurelius did value rationality and wisdom, these are simply two among many virtues which they considered important. Courage, justice, and temperance are, in Stoic philosophy, arguably just as important, if not more important than wisdom. And whereas Aristotle believed that suffering is ideally something to be avoided, when it comes to suffering, Stoics are more like, who cares? Just suffer and deal with it. So today, if we were looking for a model Aristotelian, we might look to scientists such as Neil deGrasse Tyson, Michio Kaku, and Albert Einstein. And if we were looking for model Stoics, we might look to military leaders, Olympic athletes, virtuoso musicians, or others who actually lean into suffering in order to achieve excellence. My goal in presenting these different philosophies hasn't been to promote any one of them. I believe that they all have something of value to offer. But I also believe that no one of these philosophies can uniformly apply to all individuals. That's not to say I don't believe there's a highest good. I just don't believe that that highest good looks the same or manifests in the same way for every single person. So although Stoicism is now one of the biggest trends, understand that it is just that, a trend. You don't have to be a Stoic to be a real man or pursue virtue or excellence, or even to live a good life. Try avoiding isms and instead use your own critical thinking to control your life. Which of these philosophies do you most resonate with? What are your own core values, and what principles or values will you implement from what you learned? If you want to dig deeper into understanding the logical basis of value and why it actually is a real objective thing, then be sure to watch this next video.